I'm going to talk about three things that I think are important, but y'all probably have a lot of things you'd rather me talk about, and I'm going to give you plenty of time to ask all the questions you want to when my speech is over. But first of all, the Congress did something about 3 weeks ago that we hadn't done in 7 years. We actually passed an appropriations bill that set some priorities, fixed some of our problems in this country, and moved us forward. We didn't do it the right way, we did it the wrong way, but we did it to the best way we could possibly do it. And I'll give you a little scenario of what I'm talking about. There are 4 ways for Congress to appropriate money or not appropriate money. One is don't do their job and shut the government down. We all know what happened in 1998 when we shut the government down. In fact, everybody says, what do you get when you get a government shutdown? You get Johnny Isakson. That's what you get. Because when Newt shut the government down in 1998, he resigned at the end of that election year because of the reaction to shutting it down. I ran to replace him and I got elected. That's about the only thing that happened that was good for shutting the government down. That's, of course, my editorial comment, not his. Second way to do it is do a continuing resolution. That's what we've done for 7 years. That's what's called a CR. To these men and women in the military that are here today, they know what a CR means. A CR means you continue to do everything next year you did last year, whether or not you need to make a change or not. It is a lousy way to run a family. It's a lousy way to run a country. And finally, we broke that habit this year. We did the next best thing you could do. We did an omnibus appropriation. Omnibus appropriation means we took all 12 appropriation bills, all of which had passed the House or Senate in one form or another, and merged them into one giant bill of appropriations for $1,181 billion and passed it. But when we did it, we set priorities for the country. We made cuts, and this has gotten no press, by the way, and I'm hoping my speech today will get it some press. We spent more than $100 billion less than we appropriated in 2008. So every time everybody tells you Congress is spending more money than it's got to spend, we spent less this year by doing our job than we did in 2008. More than $100 billion less. And in terms of the military that's here today, we put a hole in sequestration. We didn't solve all the sequestration problems. But we reprioritized and reprogrammed a lot of our military money. Our military is in better shape than it's been in the last 5 years appropriation-wise. We got a ways to go, but we're moving in the right direction. General Abe Abrams and I were at Fort Bragg Monday together for the 82nd Airborne anniversary. I spent an hour and a half with General Abrams, and he is as delighted as he has been in 5 years to see us finally moving in a way we're going to empower our military to do the job they need to do and are going to have to do. So we did a good job in that bill. Some of the things that helped Georgia, number one, the Port of Savannah. We got a $21 million placeholder for the Port of Savannah. We need $100 million, which we will get. But getting that placeholder in position gets this administration committed to matching the money the state has put up to see to it we widen and deepen the channel in Savannah. What does that mean to Georgia? Well, let me just tell you this. I would suggest to you Georgia wouldn't be Georgia without 2 things. Hartsfield International Airport and the Port of Savannah. You pull those 2 assets out of our state and we're just any old regular other southeastern state. But because we have the net most profitable port in the United States of America in Savannah, we export and sell more out of Savannah than we bring into the United States. That's called positive balance of trade. Because we're an agricultural state with 21% of our economy being agriculture, bulk shipping is important. Port of Savannah is a huge bulk shipping port. When this dredging to 47 feet is finished, I want you to get this. This is an important number to know. The largest ships coming through the Port of Savannah this year carry 9,000 tractor-trailer loaders of containers. 9,000. In 2021, when the dredging and expansion is finished, the Panamax ships will bring 14,000 per ship. Now you do your math real quick, that's a 50% increase in throughput on the same ship. That's a huge asset for the economy, it's huge for our state, and it expands our state. We have an inland port now in Cordele where we're going to take that cargo off the ship in Savannah, put it right on a rail car and take it to Cordele to send it out on the interstate system. That's jobs for Cordele. Governor Deal did a great job last year when he enumerated another inland port, being Dalton, Georgia, where most of the world's carpet's made. We use our rail connections between the port and Dalton. We should make the carpet in Dalton, ship it on the rail to the coast, to Savannah, and then ship it overseas and sell it. That's good for our economy, it's good for our exports, it's good for our trade. So when people talk about the appropriations bill we did in December as just being Congress doing the same old thing, they're wrong. We spend less money than we spent in a long time. We reprioritized our money for the military, which is the right thing to do. And we assured the fact that our port's going to be expanded and finished, and Georgia's going to continue to be the premier port city on the east coast of the United States of America. And then we did one other thing, and I haven't had this much fun in a long time. A senator who shall go nameless from the state of Alabama decided he was going to put in some nefarious language in the budget at the last minute that would cause the Department of Justice to do nefarious things in terms of the state of Georgia and our use of water in Lake Altoona and the ACF and the ACT. It was last-minute language that he had the ability to get in it because as a chairman and somebody with a lot of power in the United States Senate or the United States House, he was able to do it. But because our delegation, Republican and Democrat alike, came together in the last 48 hours of the budget process, we got the language out, totally erased. John Lewis and Sanford Bishop were of immeasurable help on the Democratic side. Every single member of the Republican conference, in terms of Georgia Republican senators and congressmen, did the same thing. We matched the power and longevity of that senator, and we got that language out, which should have never been in there in the first place. You never should put in an appropriation bill, a legislative act, without debating the Congress of the United States, and that's what he was trying to do, and we stopped it. Now, they'll try again because border wars is a big deal. It's all about the economy and economic growth and opportunity. But I'm going to see to it, as long as I'm around, that the drinking water and the water that people in the state of Georgia need is there and it's available to them. And I'm going to see to it we meet our obligation to not interfere with the water levels in Alabama and Florida, see to it they have the water as well. It's time our states started working together to plan for water rather than fight each other through nefarious activities in the budget process. And I'm going to continue to win that fight. We also, another thing we got criticism for, not only did we do an omnibus appropriation bill, but we merged the tax bill into it. Everybody said you shouldn't have done that. You didn't have time to read all that stuff. We'd read it for months and years before. We finally did 67 tax provisions that we should have done a long time ago. I'm going to tell you what some of them are because we made some of them permanent. We took the 50% bonus depreciation and expensing for small business and made it permanent. So small businesses can now expense in terms of capital outlay up to $500,000 a year in purchases, which means they don't have to depreciate it. It gives them a better return on their money, gives them an incentive to go out and buy capital products and make a capital investment. It's good for them. We extended permanently the research and development tax credit. R&D is huge in our state. I was at a pharmaceutical company in Smyrna yesterday doing research on breakthrough drugs in terms of neurological diseases and things of that nature. R&D tax credits are huge to get people to do the research and development necessary to develop the products that are necessary to meet the challenges of the 21st century, whether in the operating rooms of Wellstar, whether in the campus of Georgia Tech, or wherever they might be. And so I'm very proud that we finally did a permanent extension of the research and development tax credit for our tax code. It's good for America, it's good for jobs, and it will bring a lot more money to us than it will ever cost us. We also did one other thing, which may not sound like much, but for anybody in here that's in the real estate business, for years and years, tenant improvements in shopping centers and office buildings have been depreciable over a 33-year period of time, which means you recover your investment over 33 years, yet it wears out in 7 to 10 years. We removed that 33-year on tenant improvements down to 15 years. So now business is going to be motivated to improve property, improve tenants, improve shopping centers, improve investment. It's going to be good for small business. It's going to be good for real estate. And it's going to be good for great cities like Atlanta. I was very proud to be a part of that effort. I'm glad we got that done. As I said, we did 67 other provisions. I'm not going to list all of them because you'll all go to sleep, like the gentleman at the back of the room. But I wanted to get into those key provisions. Next, we passed Trade Promotion Authority. Trade Promotion Authority means we gave the President the ability to negotiate a trade deal without the interference of Congress until it's finally negotiated, and then we get an up or down vote on whether or not to do it. A lot of people have said we usurped our authority and took the Congress out of the trade deal. We did not. We gave the President the power to sit across the table from the President of the other country we're dealing with and try and make a deal and then bring it back for one up or down vote by the Congress. Can you imagine 535 members of the House and Senate negotiating a trade deal, one deal at a time? You'd never get anything done. So we finally did it. It's called Fast Track. I'll tell you something you probably don't know. America has a Fast Track trade agreement with Colombia, with Panama, and with South Korea. We don't with Sweden, Denmark, Great Britain, Spain, and all of the European Union. Wouldn't you think our largest trading partner we ought to have an agreement with? We don't. It's because we haven't given our president the authority to negotiate a comprehensive deal. Now we will. If he does a bad one like he did with the Iranians, we won't ratify it. But if he does a good one, we'll do it for American business and for Georgia business. We passed the Keystone Pipeline. I bring that up. All of you know the president vetoed it, but that was a very important bill for us to do. We finally, in the appropriations bill, lifted the ban on exporting petroleum from the United States to overseas because we're now a net producer of petroleum and refined gasoline rather than a net user. We ought to be able to sell it overseas to help our businesses. But if we were bringing the Canadian oil into America through the Keystone Pipeline, we'd be the largest provider of oil in the world now that we've lifted the export ban against the United States of America. And that would be good for our country, be good for our economy. When did you think the time would come that America would be a net beneficiary of petroleum rather than a net user of petroleum? Don't think you ever thought that would come, but it's here today in America, and I'm proud we did that. Now, lastly, before I open the floor for questions, nothing else matters other than what's going on in the Middle East right now and all over the world. And I'm going to be very frank in my remarks, and I know the cameras are rolling, I know the microphones are on. In fact, I have a little 3x5 card on my mirror in my condominium in Washington, Maria. You know what it says? It says, "Remember, stupid, everything's a camera or a recording device." And I do that because everything is a camera or a recording device. So when I walk out of my condominium door in Washington every Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, I know I might be recorded. So, but I want to tell you from my bottom of my heart what I think about the situation in the Middle East. America has abdicated its leadership responsibility in the world for far too long in the last 5 to 6 years. What happened in the Ukraine should have never happened. The Ukrainians were the first country to give over their weapons of mass destruction in return for the United States promising to defend them if they were ever invaded. And then the Soviet Union, or the Russia, not the Soviet Union now, went into the Ukraine and we did nothing. That's unacceptable. What's happening in the Middle East now with Russia coming into Syria and Russia starting to come in, they're coming in for one reason, because we're not exercising the will that we need to get in there and make sure that the right things happen. The president drew 5 lines in the sand 3 years ago in 2013. Every time the Assad crossed those lines, the president backed up and moved the line further away. And finally, the president just backed away entirely and said we're going to have a long-term strategy instead of a short-term strategy. As I was talking with General Abrams on Monday, a long-term strategy means an 8 to 15-year time period before you finally wear ISIL down. During that period of time, thousands of innocent people are going to be killed and murdered and maimed. Hundreds of American troops may die, even with the limited engagement we have today. It is time we engaged in the world community and said this will not stand. Nobody in their right mind can find a way to accommodate, accept, or just contain what's going on in Syria with ISIL. ISIL is the Islamic State in the Levant. You know what the Levant is? It's all of the Western Mediterranean. They're trying to create a caliphate that surrounds the Mediterranean because they're going into the Maghreb. The Maghreb is North Africa. They want to create a whole new country that's all of North Africa and all of the Middle East surrounding the Mediterranean. And when they do that, they're going to run it with a religious caliphate, which means if you don't agree with them, they're going to kill you. If you're a woman, you're not going to school. If you're a woman, you're not going anywhere without your husband's approval. It's going to be back to the Stone Age. We can't allow that to happen. Everybody said, well, that'll never happen. Well, they said that about Hitler in 1939. They said, well, he's in Austria, but he's not going to go into Poland. He's not going to expand in Europe. And finally he did, and we spent 5 years and 1 million lives trying to get rid of him, and we finally did. But ISIL is as bad or more dangerous in a lot of ways than Adolf Hitler was in World War II. And we cannot stand on the sidelines and just have a policy of containment. Now, I was on Squawk Box 6 months ago, and I was doing a business interview, Maria. They were asking me questions about the economy and about real estate and about being in Congress and stuff like that. And at the last minute, the woman, who I forget her name now, she said, by the way, Senator, let me ask you a question. If you were the President of the United States, what would you be doing with ISIL? Well, that came totally out of left field in a business interview, but the first thing out of my mouth was exactly what I believe. I said, you know, if somebody will kill you, if somebody will kill themselves in order to kill you, if somebody will burn you in a cage in the courthouse steps without a trial, then the only way you defeat them is to kill them. You can't negotiate with them, you can't accommodate them, you can't contain them, you got to kill them. And until we put the troops on the ground necessary to carry out a coordinated attack to go after ISIL, they're going to continue to grow. They've been growing even in our containment provision, and as long as we do that, we're going to be a weaker country than we've been before. What happened in Paris today on the anniversary of Charlie Hebdo is just an example. You had one single terrorist, we think one single terrorist, who had a fake suicide belt but a knife in Paris, France today at the headquarters of Charlie Hebdo or one of the police stations trying to attack somebody. What happened in San Bernardino, those are going to grow and grow and grow. As long as we don't defeat this enemy to the ground and put them back in the Stone Age where they belong, we're going to continue to be with them. And my children and my grandchildren are not going to be as safe as I've been in my life, and I'm going to see to it I don't leave them off worse than my parents left me. So if you want to write in your paper what I think about the Middle East, I think there's a role for the American people. There's a role for democracy and freedom and peace-loving people to see to it that we confront the evil that's there and defeat it, and allow those people in that part of the world to self-determine their future, but not to be determined, be held hostage by those that would kill, burn, maim, and bomb just in the name of a radically hijacked element of a religion. That's just not right, and as long as I'm in Congress, I'm going to try and give our military and our State Department and our Foreign Services people the manpower, the money, and the personnel they need to carry out whatever mission we do to see to it we never become subservient to a state like the Islamic State in Levant. With that said, if you don't have any questions, I'll sit down. If you do, I'll talk. shy bunch of reporters? No, Maria? Maria?
I'll start it off. I know you're not going to take a position on 2016 presidential politics.
I have one position. I'm for Johnny Isakson. I made that decision.
Yeah, great. Can you talk about the state of the Republican Party when they talk about the establishment versus the non-establishment, and how you see things working through that through the primary season?
That's a minefield right there. let me just say this. I've been in public life for 41 years in Georgia. All of them as a Republican. When you write the story, whatever you write, remember I was a Republican in the beginning. I didn't wait and have an epiphany later on. I started out when there weren't any of us, and now I'm glad there are a lot of us. But what I'm going to say is, Maria, in all my years of presidential races, I've never seen us have 17 people trying to be president of the United States as a Republican. It used to be the other way around. I mean, we would have one Republican running and there'd be 17 in the Democratic primary. And now that's role is reversed. Anytime you have 17 people, you're going to have a wider diversity of interest and a wider diversity of activity. So I think that's healthy for the party. The process is going to work its will. It's already beginning to work its will. We've gone from 17 to, I think, 14 candidates. I think what happens in Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina will probably take that number down to 10. And then the SEC primary, of which Georgia is a part of, where the voters of Georgia and 5 other southeastern states, or I think it's 5 other states, will have a huge say in who's left remaining. I'd rather the process determine who the winners and losers are rather than me trying to make some prognostication. So I'm going to support the Republican nominee of the party. I'm glad we got 17 people originally who are trying. I'm glad we've still got 14 who are in the game, and I hope when we get down to the end we have a candidate we can nominate, elect, and win in November of 2016. That's as far as I'm going to go.
You don't want to talk about the front runner?
Well, it depends on who you think's the front runner is. You go around this room. I see some people in here in various. There are some Republicans in the room, by the way. I want y'all to know that. I'm not going to point them out because they might get embarrassed if I do that. And I see 3 that all have a different favorite, so I'm not going to pick between my 3 friends.
Well, when you were talking about how you've never seen a situation where presidential candidates can call up the media and they will just let them go on the air, can you talk a little
What I said was I've never seen the media allow that to take place before. But it used to be, I've been on Stephanopoulos once. I was on once when nobody else in the Congress would go. It was after the Sandy Hook assassin murders in Connecticut. I asked them if I could do it from a studio. They said, no, you got to do it live with us. You know, they just got these rules. If you aren't in the studio doing it live with them, they don't want you to do it. But now in this campaign, and it's not, I mean, there are a number of candidates who, if they call in, they'll get interviews. So I yearn for the day as a candidate that I can dial the telephone, dial the TV station, they put me on for an interview. That's good kind of politics. So it's the first time I've ever seen that happen. It's good accessibility. It's also causes some problems as well. Yes, sir.
As an observer of politics, it seems to me like what's best for the United States is not the objective of both parties. To me, from what I see, the objective of each party is to do what's worse for the other party, or to do what makes the president look bad. Do you agree with that? And if so, how do we solve that?
I agree that as an observer and trying to perceive what's going on, that would probably be my perception as an observer that was casual. I could tell you somebody that's involved, that the Democrats that I know and the Republicans that I know all passionately love this country. They may have a different idea about how you get to the end result, but their goal at the end is the same. Nobody wants to surrender. Nobody wants to abolish the Constitution. Everybody wants to protect the freedom and liberty we all have. Just have different ways to get there. So I'm not going to, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, I haven't met in my engagement in public life, all the races that I've had, I've never seen somebody by party or category of affiliation not respect and appreciate what we have as a country. I've seen a lot of people who wanted to go a different way in terms of getting to the end result, but never one who fought it. So I think the perception is sometimes the talking heads on TV. If you're a Republican, you're wrong if the Democrat's talking. If you're a Democrat, you're wrong if the Republican's talking. That's the perception they deliver, but it doesn't go as deep as the elected officials. Yes, sir. Mr. Crane, how are you?
Good to see you, sir. Not everyone in this room knows you're the only United States Senator who chairs 2 committees. I want to
Now they do.
One of those. You chair the Veteran Services Committee, and you had a major piece of legislation last year that's really helped the veterans community, particularly as it relates to veterans' choice. Once, if you could give us an update on that. And then I know there are some Republicans in the room, but I want to give you credit where you never give yourself. You were an early supporter of non-embryonic stem
Well, I'll start with that first, and Emory University's in the room, Wellstar's in the room, I'm sure there are other healthcare delivers. Where we've come in the last 8 years on stem cell research is remarkable in this country. And the non-embryonic stem cell research and the breakthroughs that are being done are just phenomenal, and there are a lot of things being done at Emory University and a lot of applications at Wellstar and their facilities that are saving lives that would not have been saved in the past. And it is a good technology. And Dr. Stephen Stice at the University of Georgia is probably the preeminent scholar in the United States on non-embryonic stem cell research. And he's the guy that advised me when I was passed the bill I did in the Senate. So thank you for bringing that up. But
And when you stepped out, it was at some political peril at the time that sport that looked out?
it was, let's just put it this way, it was misunderstood, and I helped people to understand what it was. And I've got 3 scars on the back here if you want to see them. Now, the first part of that question was the Veterans Administration. I am so proud of what we did. John McCain has become my great partner in this, and he is a wonderful American. As you know, he was a prisoner of war, served a career in the United States Navy, was a Navy pilot, shot down over Hanoi. And when the Phoenix tragedy took place in August of 2014, and John represents Arizona in the Congress, he said, you know, this can't stand. So we went after the VA situation where they were delaying appointments, they were manipulating the books, veterans couldn't get their services. We said, you know, if the VA doesn't have the manpower and we don't have the money to make it where a veteran can get an appointment within 30 days, or if they need enough services, we're going to see to it the private sector meets that demand. So we created what was known as Veterans Choice. So if you're a veteran eligible for veteran health care, and there's 6.5 million of them in the United States of America who are, if you can't get an appointment within 30 days, or if you live more than 40 miles from a VA facility, you can call a private Medicare-approved doctor and get your service. Last year, that was signed into law in January of 2015. Last year, in the first 9 months of 2015, the Veterans Administration served 7.5 million more veteran appointments than it did in the preceding year. 7.5 million more. I know of cases where the veterans who are probably alive today because of that law, because they got timely service rather than protracted service. And I'm working to do everything. The reason I was at Fort Bragg on Monday with General Abrams, we dedicated a new hospital that's been built in Fayetteville, North Carolina. We're going to see to it that either through the VA delivery system or empowerment of the private sector at Wellstar and Emory and everywhere else, that if you're a veteran of the United States military and you served your time and you were promised by your government you're going to have health care, not only are you going to have health care, but you're going to have quality health care, accessible health care. We're going to see to it that happens either through the government or through the private sector, whichever can deliver it better. And I appreciate you mentioning that, so thank you. Yes, ma'am.
In addition to representing Georgia Tech, I also represent the Brain Injury Association of Georgia, and I wanted to get an update and hear your vision on the Neurological Disease Act.
Well, I'm a co-sponsor of the Neurological Disease Act. I have a neurological disease, so I have a passion. But I got involved in neurological diseases before I had one. I want to put that on the table. But, you know, for years we haven't had the clinical information available to us to really make some of the calculated decisions you have to make in terms of health care. So we're trying to create a registry of all neurological diseases so we can have a embedded knowledge of information within the United States of America for great institutions like Georgia Tech and Emory and others to make the kind of clinical decisions they have to make. Let me brag about Tech for a second. I'm a Georgia graduate, so I want y'all to put that in. Athens banner. Nancy Desmond's here, so write this down, Nancy. Yesterday I was at UCB in Smyrna, Georgia. UCB is a manufacturer of pharmaceuticals, most of them for neurological diseases like epilepsy and Parkinson's and things of that nature. And I've done a lot of work with them because they've done a lot of breakthrough drugs. But one of the biggest problems in terms of the healthcare in our country is the medical IT, the medical records are great to have, but they don't talk to each other. They're a big roadblock. You know, Epic doesn't want Greenway to talk to them. Greenway doesn't want Epic to talk to them. So you go to the hospital, you go to Wellstar, and I'm not picking on you, but Wellstar has Epic. I love it when I leave my doctor's. I get a full printout of all my drugs that I'm on, all the prescriptions I've got, all the things the doctor told me to do, what my blood pressure was, what my heart rate was. It's terrific. But if I had gone somewhere that didn't have Epic, I couldn't get that because they don't talk to each other. Tech has developed a system called FIRE. Is that not correct? Isn't it called FIRE? It's not FIRE, but it's almost like FIRE. Where it's like an interpreter. It can interpret Epic and turn it into Greenway. So you can have two electronic medical records companies with a different software that can talk to each other with permission of each other. So we have an interpreter for these, breaks down what's happened is the private sector competition and medical IT has caused people not to want people to, They hoped if Epic was the one that everybody used, then everybody'd buy Epic and they'd have an insurance policy. Well, that's not the free enterprise system. And that's not the competition system. And what Georgia Tech has developed, and it's not patented yet, I don't think, but it's on the in the process of being patented, has developed a system where every medical IT system will have an interpreter. So Epic can talk to Greenway, Greenway can talk to Cerner, Cerner can talk to Epic. So if you're a patient and you have electronic medical records in any one of the electronic medical records companies, they can talk to each other, and it's going to save lives, it's going to make healthcare better. And the Georgia Institute of Technology has developed it, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. Yes, ma'am. What have you done that I can brag about?
I'm a United States Navy veteran, sir, and
God bless you.
support you cheering John Lewis on for a ship being named after him. I was one of the first women to serve aboard a ship in the United States Navy, so yay, John Lewis. I'd like to ask you the question, sir, around federal partnerships with the city of Atlanta. You know, it's a very critical time for cities and the budget cuts and so forth, and there are major developments happening in the city of Atlanta, which I know you're very aware of. And I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit about how you see that federal partnership might work for us over the next couple of years, and in particular, in an area of Atlanta known as the Proctor Creek Watershed Basin, and the green economic development. It could be available for all, but there is this underlying concern around gentrification.
Well, I know just enough about Proctor Creek to get in trouble, and so I'm going to try and be very careful. I met with the city and some of the people, activists interested in Proctor Creek 2 years ago, right, Edward? When it was. Frank Redmond, R-E-D-M-O-N-D, is in my office, who was with the EPA for 35 years, is on the Proctor Creek case, and my office is trying to assist the city and the interested parties in Proctor Creek. But I can't tell you where it is right now. I just want you to know it's on my radar screen, and I've got a staffer that's in charge of it. Anytime we can clean up an environmental area and turn it into an asset for a community rather than a liability, I want to be a part of doing it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
What's left to be done to correct our tax code going forward?
How long have you got?
Well, I believe in 2017 that process will begin. Nothing's going to happen this year. The extensions that we did that I mentioned, the 67 extensions we did in the omnibus budget bill, were deals we were working on to include in the total reform, but we couldn't get the reform done. This is a presidential election year. It's just not going to happen. But in 2017, it'll be the number one. Whoever's elected president, let me tell you something. Our country is operating on borrowed time. We're the highest taxed corporate income tax country in the world. You know, when Ireland went to 12.5% tax rate and we're 35%, Great Britain's lower than we are now. Japan was higher, they're now lower than we were. They dropped down to 30%. We're having inversions where American companies are selling themselves or merging with foreign companies and moving their headquarters offshore to take advantage. Let me tell you something. When the second largest burger company in America, Burger King, buys a donut shop in Toronto to pay Canadian taxes rather than American taxes, you got a problem. And that's exactly what happened. We had a short period of time to do it. I would never want Coca-Cola to go to Tokyo or go to Bangalore, India, or go somewhere else. But they have an obligation to their stockholders. They have an obligation to the people that own their company. And if you're paying a 35%, if you're a C Corp paying a 35% tax rate in America, and you could be paying a 20% rate somewhere else, or 12.5 or 17 or whatever it is, you have to ask yourself the question, is that the right thing for our stockholders? Now, I use Coke as an example just off the cuff. It had nothing to do with anything that might happen. But that's exactly what can happen. And with the world being flat like it is, like Tom Friedman's book, where oceans are no barriers anymore, the computer connects us all, we are not, the oceans don't protect us anymore from competition because we can get around the oceans. We have to be sure we have the best code in the world. So I think it's time that we did, and I think 2017 is when we'll do it, and I think we can do it. And on that subject, here I'm giving a long answer when I was trying to avoid doing that, but on that subject, we also have to fix the ordinary income tax brackets, because most of Americans are employed not by major corporations, but by small business. Most small businesses are sub-S corporations, LLCs, or proprietorships. They pay under the ordinary income tax rate on the profits that flow through on the K-1. Right now in Georgia, with the Georgia income tax and the federal income tax, if you're a small business and make more than $450,000 in a year, your tax rate's 43.5%, not 35. If we lowered the federal tax rate on C corps to 28, and they stayed at 43.6 in terms of S corps, there'd be a huge disparity in tax rates for small businesses in Georgia. So I want to reform them all. Lastly, and I'm going to shut up, we need a territorial tax system, which means you pay tax where you earn the money, not twice. Right now, if Coca-Cola, or I'll use somebody else, if Home Depot sells a product in Great Britain, they pay a tax in Great Britain. If they bring that profit, what's left after the tax, back to America, they pay American taxes again. That ain't right. If they made it in India, or they made it in Great Britain, or they made it in France, they ought to pay taxes there. If they make it in America, they ought to pay taxes here. We're only 3 countries left in the world that don't have a territorial tax system, and we need to get one post-haste to ensure that we maintain our competitive nature as a great free country. I won't say any more.
I think we have time for one more question.
Sam?
I don't think there's been any more contentious issue than public education and the fights over No Child Left Behind and your leadership in that role. Tell us about what happened.
Well, we finally, after 7 years, did a reauthorization of No Child Left Behind, which basically kept the parts of that were good, the disaggregation of students, the student-to-student comparison rather than averaging people out into the ITBS scores or something, saying you're at the 2.7 median or whatever. We measure every child on their performance. We disaggregate every child by ethnicity, by race, by disability, by special education, by every other category. We have good goals in there and good federal assistance for those people that are meeting their goals, but we got rid of Common Core as a mandate from the federal government. We got rid of federal waivers having to be applied for by local boards of education and re-empowered the state boards and the local boards. I was very proud of what we did. Your buddy and my buddy, Lamar Alexander, led that charge in the Senate. We passed the reauthorization in October. It's the first time in the history of education legislation in America that the unions, the NASB, the school systems, the superintendents, and the governors all unanimously endorsed the bill. Something must be right about it. We finally stopped meddling and started working, and so we're going to have a better federal role in education, although less obtrusive and less confiscatory. We're going to have more empowerment at the local level, and people are going to be, I think, very pleased with what they see out of the SEA in years ahead. Thank you for asking that. I think that means I'm through. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much, Senator. And as said, he's going to be nice enough to work with the working press back there. And I think we're adjourned. Have a good day.